So you pass your AWS certification, you get the badge, and you post it on LinkedIn. And what happens? Well, everybody just congratulates you. And for a few days, it feels like you've finally done something that's really going to change your career. But then when the dust settles and Monday comes around, and apart from a few more comments on your LinkedIn post, nothing has actually changed. You're back in the same role, doing the same work. And when you open a cloud job description, you still recognize most of the AWS services on the page, but you don't feel ready to actually apply for a role. Or maybe you have applied. You've sent your CV out to recruiters and companies and you've barely heard anything back. And now you're thinking this, right? Clearly, the certification that I just passed wasn't enough. I probably need to do another one. And look, I completely understand why you'd think that. You've learned something, you've passed an exam, and you expected it to actually improve your chances of getting a cloud job. When the job doesn't come, the obvious conclusion is that you need to learn more. But if another certification is the thing that's actually going to change your chances and change everything for you, why did the last certification that you did basically change absolutely nothing? And that's really the question that I want to answer in this video, because the problem isn't that your certification doesn't count or it's useless. The problem is that the certification gave you a very clear way to feel like you are moving forward while still allowing you to avoid the much more uncomfortable part of actually trying to get hired. And you didn't do that deliberately. You started because you wanted a better job. You wanted more freedom. You just wanted to make more money. But somewhere along the way, learning AWS became the goal because it just simply felt a lot safer than actually finding out whether somebody would hire you to use AWS instead. And that is really how you can be AWS certified. Genuinely be working hard, putting in the hours, and still end up in the exact same place. Hi, I'm Suleiman. For those who don't know me, I started my career as an apprentice before moving through different areas in tech, from software engineering to cloud engineering to DevOps to architecture. I've built my own consulting company as well on the back of it. I have a software company that helps people get AWS and AI certified in weeks. And I've got one of the biggest, if not the biggest, AWS and cloud channels on YouTube, Tech with Suleiman. You can go check that out as well. Now, I have spent more than 11 years working in tech, and more than 7 of those have actually been working directly with AWS in cloud, and not just doing some governance and documents and stuff. I've been in the trenches, building solutions, migrating infrastructure, modernizing infrastructure. I've basically done it all, from Fortune 500 to startups to government agencies. I've worked across multiple industries, from fintech to healthcare to defense to telecom to energy, food and beverages. I've been there and I've done it. And throughout the years, I've actually spoken to so many people in this exact position as you. They're doing courses after courses, earning certifications, and they're just trying to do what they believe will get them hired. But none of the work that they're doing is actually turning into something tangible, which is a cloud job that they wanted in the first place. So you see, this isn't going to be another video on AWS roadmaps or listing random services for you. I want to talk about why all of the effort isn't changing the actual result. What you're really avoiding when you tell yourself that you need more preparation, and what happens if you keep making the same decision for another year. Let's get into it. So let's start by being fair to the actual certification, because you might hear a title like this and just assume that I'm going to be bashing the certification industry and tell you it's pointless. It's not. I actually have my own software company, like I said, that's to do with AI and AWS certifications. I'm not saying that they're useless at all. They have their place in the industry. The certification gave you a syllabus. It told you which topics to learn and gave you also a clear test at the very end. So if your practice score was too low, you just went back over the same material, and once it was high enough, you booked your exam. You knew the rules and you knew there was a correct way of playing it. And you knew that there was a correct answer in front of you, right? From the multiple choice that you are presented. But the thing is, all it was designed to do was prepare you for the exam. It was never designed to choose a cloud role for you. Build the evidence that you can actually do that role. Get your CV in front of the right people, or even help you explain your decisions when the interviewer starts prompting you around your answers and challenging you. That part was always going to require a different type of work, a different approach. Because the job market is nowhere near as easy as it was a number of years ago. A company can really just ignore your application without telling you why. An interviewer can also ask you something that you didn't prepare for, keep asking you why you made certain decisions, and eventually finding the edge of your understanding. You may even have to choose between two sensible answers, right? Explain the trade-offs and change your decision when certain requirements that they gave you actually change. So the truth is, if you spent months inside of courses and practice exams, of course, the interview process will feel uncomfortable because the certification lets you practice privately, right, until you felt ready. Whereas the actual job market makes you perform before you can ever feel completely ready. And then somebody else gets to actually decide what happens next. And obviously, that's a completely different test. And this is where another certification becomes so tempting. So instead of entering a process where the answer is uncertain, you just get back to something that you understand. You follow another syllabus and you make yourself feel like you're making progress again. Now, maybe you genuinely need the knowledge in that next certification that you're trying to take. That is a possibility. But if you're really honest with yourself, you probably know whether that is really why you are doing it. The real reason is that another certification actually allows you to delay the moment where somebody outside the course gets to tell you where you actually stand. And this is why I don't think the issue is that you might be lazy or that you might not want it badly enough. You may be studying after a full day at work, right? Balancing life and kids and all this other stuff, right? Which is generally difficult. You might be tired, you have other responsibilities, but you're still choosing to open your laptop because you're trying to build something better for yourself. So when somebody tells you that you need to take more action, I understand why that annoys you. In your mind, you are taking action because you've completed the courses, you've passed the exam, and you spend hours looking into different routes into cloud. But there are two different things happening here. You're doing a lot of work, but most of the work you've chosen is actually work that can't really give you an answer that you don't like. A course isn't going to reject you. Question whether you understand your own project or ask a follow-up question in front of 3 interviewers and watch you struggle to explain what you really built. So when you finish the work and you just spend another night watching lessons, it still feels productive because you are learning. And when somebody at home asks how that cloud career change is going for you, you can honestly say that you're still working on it. But that answer can't last forever, can it? That answer could still be true 6 months from now, and you could still be telling people that you're nearly ready next year because you are genuinely putting in the hours, and it becomes very difficult to admit that the hours are no longer solving the thing that's actually keeping you stuck. And that is the trap, right? Because you're not avoiding the effort, you're putting in the effort into part of the process where nobody else gets to judge the actual result. And at first, you tell yourself that you apply for roles after the solutions architect certification. Once you pass it, another AWS certification may make you a little bit more credible. Then you need a Terraform or another project, or you might go do Kubernetes. Work gets busy and suddenly the job market looks a little bit uncertain. You just basically, not every one of those reasons can sound very sensible on their own. But when the reason changes every time that you get close to applying for roles, you really have to start questioning whether the preparation is still the goal or whether the preparation has become a way to actually avoid starting. And I think deep down, you know which one it is. You began because you wanted to land a cloud job, not because you wanted to become brilliant at completing courses. So if the last 6 months have produced more notes and badges, but your actual career hasn't moved, being busy is not the same thing as making real progress. Now, the reason this can carry on for so long is that your current job probably isn't awful. If it was genuinely unbearable, you wouldn't need another YouTube video to create more urgency. You'd be doing everything that you could to get out. But your job is probably somewhere in the middle. It pays the bills, you know the systems, the people might be all right, and you've been there long enough that the work just feels familiar. You don't love it, but you can survive it. And to be honest, that's a much more dangerous position to be in than a lot of people realize. If somebody asks you how your work is going, you're probably going to say that it's fine. Then if they ask you, what does fine even mean? You start telling them that the work is repetitive, that there is a lack of growth, or the promotion that just keeps getting pushed back. But halfway through, you actually begin defending the job. The people are nice though. The benefits are all right though. At least I've got something stable. Now, look, being grateful for what you have is a good thing, right? Gratitude is important. But gratitude does not require you to pretend that a job is taking you somewhere when you know that it isn't. Because this stuff rarely falls apart through one huge event. Normally, it's actually a slow build up of a lot of little things that you just brush aside. Another salary review that doesn't change much. Somebody else getting the opportunity that you wanted, and Sundays start feeling a little bit uncomfortable earlier than it used to. What do? Well, mate, you open up LinkedIn and you see somebody that you used to work with has announced a new role. You are happy for them, but if we're really being honest, part of you immediately starts comparing. You look at how long they've been in the field, you wonder what they're earning, and then you think about where you could have been if you properly committed when you first started talking about cloud. And that's really the part that people don't normally say out loud, because it starts to feel like everybody else has continued moving and progressing while you're still the same version of yourself from 3 or even 4 years ago. And the longer that continues, the harder it becomes to face, because you're now dealing with the disappointment of knowing how long you've been aware of it as well. So you just make the problem smaller in your head, right? You tell yourself that it's mainly about money, or that you're just exploring options at the moment, or that the market needs to improve before you can make a real decision. Now, those explanations feel better because they don't require anything from you today, but they also allow another year to disappear without ever deciding what you're actually doing. And that is why a job that is a 5 or a 6 out of 10 holds people for so long. It isn't that it is bad enough to force you out, but also it isn't good enough to build the career or the life that you say you want. So what happens? You just sit in the middle, uncomfortable enough to keep thinking about leaving, but also comfortable enough to just keep delaying it. Does that make any sense? And underneath all of this is the fear of actually getting it wrong. Maybe you've invested time into something before and it went nowhere. Maybe you've applied for cloud roles and you've heard nothing back. Or maybe you've got family and a decent salary, but the actual idea of making the wrong move feels far more serious than it did 10 years ago. And all of that is reasonable. The problem is that fear doesn't normally feel like fear when you're experiencing it. It feels like being careful. So you research another pathway, you compare another course, and you ask another person whether AWS is still worth learning. But eventually, right, you have to ask yourself whether the research is actually helping you make a decision or whether it's giving you another good reason to avoid one. Because once avoiding failure becomes the most important thing, you don't suddenly stop working. What happens is much more quieter than that. You begin choosing the kind of work that never puts you in a position to fail publicly. So the project stays private where nobody can question it. And instead of sitting in interviews, you just continue preparing for them. Even choosing one clear route feels dangerous because then you might find out that you chose the wrong one. And every individual decision feels harmless. The problem with that is what they create when you put them together. Now, before long, you have built an entire plan where you're always preparing to become a cloud engineer, but almost nothing that you do can actually result in somebody hiring you as an actual cloud engineer. Now, I want you to think about how backwards that actually is, right? You keep saying you need more clarity and confidence, but you actually avoid the situation that would give you honest information about what is missing. An application that goes nowhere tells you something about the CV or the role or the way that you're positioning yourself. A project that falls apart when somebody challenges it shows you what you need to understand properly. And a difficult interview finally actually reveals which part of your thinking you can't explain under pressure. Now, I'm not saying any of that feels good, right? I'm saying that it is useful because you can do something with it. And another 3 months of private preparation may actually protect you from hearing no. But the same protection also stops anybody from saying yes. And that is the trade that you're making here, whether you realize it or not. And normally this really continues until something outside of your control creates the actual urgency for you. The contract ends, the company restructures, there's AI layoffs, the manager changes, or a conversation at home makes it impossible to keep pretending that everything is fine. Then all of a sudden, you move. You update the CV, you start messaging people, and you apply for roles that you had saved 6 months ago. You do in 1 week what you've been telling yourself that you weren't ready to do for like over a year. But the event didn't suddenly give you new skills, did it? The layoff didn't make you more capable. It just took away your ability to keep delaying the decision. You were just waiting for permission from a disaster. And a genuine question for you is like, what is the logic in that? If you already know that you've outgrown the role, that your skills aren't developing, and that you don't want to be in the same place 2 years from now, then what do you gain by waiting until the decision has to be made under pressure, where your hand is actually forced? You don't gain anything. You just make the same decision later on, except now you may have no money coming in, less time to think, and far fewer options. The awareness that you have right now is the actual warning. It's just arrived politely, right? Instead of smashing your life apart. And then you get to decide whether that is enough for you to take this seriously. Because doing nothing doesn't feel expensive because the money in your bank doesn't disappear all at once. Nobody sends you an invoice for the year that you spent thinking about changing careers, but you still pay with time, with the experience that you could have been building, and with your own peace of mind. Every time that you tell yourself that you're going to do something and then move the date again, you trust yourself a little bit less. After a while, what will happen is that the question changes from what do I need to learn to why do I keep doing this to myself? And that is a much heavier problem than one failed application or one uncomfortable interview. So, yes, taking action has a cost. You might find out that your CV isn't good enough yet, or that your understanding isn't as deep as you actually thought. But avoiding that small failure doesn't remove the cost. It just turns it into a slower one that follows you around every single day. Now, I really want to be clear because I'm not telling you to quit your job tomorrow, spend money that you don't have, or start sending out hundreds of random applications. That isn't courage, it's just bad decision making. What I am saying is that you need to notice where your decisions are coming from. Up until now, you've probably been asking, what if I apply and I fail? What if I choose the wrong route? What if I invest all this time and it doesn't work? Right? Because there is no answer that removes all of that risk. You keep waiting for certainty before you actually do anything. But certainty is not coming. No certification, no mentor, or no roadmap can actually guarantee that one decision that you make will fix your entire career and your entire life, right? You still have to do the work and you just keep adjusting when reality gives you new information. So instead of asking whether one move is guaranteed to work, you want to ask whether it takes you closer to the actual job and the goal that you say you want. So really, if another certification fixes a specific gap that's showing up in the roles or the interviews that you're getting, then maybe it is worth doing. But if the real issue is that nobody has seen your work, you barely apply for roles, and you've never let anybody challenge your thinking, then the certification is solving a much safer problem than the one that's actually stopping you. And really, the same applies to your current job, right? Because staying can be a smart decision if the role is developing useful skills or giving you the time and the money to build the next step properly. But if you are staying because it feels familiar while admitting that nothing there is actually preparing you for where you want to go, then you really need to stop calling that patience, right? Because your life today is definitely the result of decisions that you've made and decisions that you've continued to put off. And not saying that every difficult thing that's happened is your fault. Of course it's not. But if your decisions has helped you bring you here, different decisions can also begin taking you somewhere else. And that should really feel freeing because it really means that you're not waiting for your boss, the market, or some perfect moment to come and save you. The next move is still yours and it's still in your control. Now, look, from what I'm seeing, the people that are taking action and they are applying for roles inside of my own academy, the students that we have, they're getting hired. This past week, we've had 3 students get hired. What have they all got in common? They apply, they take action, they get the feedback, and they make things happen. Now, the reason that I'm being so direct is that I know what normally happens after a video like this. You understand the point, you feel like you've done something productive, and then tomorrow you go straight back to another course or another certification or back to the habits that you were doing while nothing actually changes in your career or in your life. So before you actually do that, just be honest about what the last 6 months have produced. If you have gained more information, but the result is exactly the same, why would another 6 months of the same approach suddenly be different, right? Because your AWS certification wasn't a mistake. The mistake was allowing the badge to become proof that the career move was happening when actually outside of the course, you were still avoiding almost every situation that can move it forward. You just kept returning to the test where you understood the rules while avoiding the applications, feedback, and interviews where you couldn't control the outcome. And after a while, the plan became less about landing a cloud job and more about making sure that you never had to find out that you weren't even ready yet. And that should annoy you because you're clearly capable of working hard. You've been putting in that work into a process that lets you stay comfortable and you just end up being tired from all the studying, but your life never has to change. And like I said before, nobody's going to come and change it for you, right? Your employer is basically focused on the work that they need from you today. Your boss is not lying in bed thinking about your career and where it needs to be 5 years from now, right? That responsibility is yours, which sounds heavy until you realize that the choice is still in your hands. You don't need to wait for another layoff, another year of regret, or for the job to become so bad that leaving is the only option left. Now, of course, it benefits me to say some of this, right? Because some of you watching will come to me for my help in the education program. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But if you're still deciding whether cloud is even something that you want to do, don't book a call with us. Keep using the free content, look at the roles properly, and make that decision first. If you have already decided on cloud, you've been studying, earning certifications, or even applying for months, and you can see that your current work isn't actually doing anything, and the approach that you're taking is keeping you busy without getting you actually hired, then just check out the links below to apply for a fit call. We'll look at what you've tried, where the process keeps breaking, and whether the academy is actually the right way for us to help you. If it isn't, the team will be able to tell you that directly. But whether you work with us or not, stop telling yourself that you're waiting for the right moment. What you're really waiting for is a moment painful enough to make that decision for you. You don't need to wait for that. You didn't start learning AWS because you want to become the most qualified person still sitting in the same job, right? You started because you wanted your career and your life to move, to make progress. So the thing to take away from this is to make the decision while it's still yours. As always, I'm rooting for you. Go and become undeniable.